me. Oh, sorry. Alright, greetings. One stream. I hope everything's going fine. I got a couple of people on live. It's been a while since I last went live. But there's been a whole bunch of questions that have been coming in from different people asking different questions. So I thought it'd be a lot easier just to go live, do a bit of a live stream and talk about them. So I hope that's okay. It's a bit of a wet day here in the UK at the moment. It's 1:33 in the afternoon. I've got my cup of tea. It's always good to have a cup of tea. Let me just have a quick. Yeah, that's good. I've got my lovely wife and assistant here next to me. You might be able to see her hand in a second. Here she goes. Alright, so if you have any questions, I genuinely would like you to put them into the comments, ask them as a question, and then we can throw them up on screen to show what people are asking. But initially, people are asking about the ATEM Mini Pro. A lot of people who are churches and organisations have recently put in an application for a grant and now have a shiny new ATEM Mini Pro that kinda looks a little bit like that or something similar. Okay, so we've been using Zoom, we've been using different things to connect along the way, so I'm going to give you a few tips on how to kind of ease your workflow of connecting your ATEM to your Zoom and about recasting software and bits and pieces. But I also want to give you some really low grade entry level solutions. So if you're using OBS Studio, if you're looking at wanting to get hold of some little cheap adapters and things like that, then that's the perfect kind of solution for you. Then we're going to go through that as well. But for now, I think I'm just going to dive straight into it. I've reminded you who I am. I've told you about the weather. British people always love to talk about the weather. So here we go. So the ATEM Mini Pro. I know that I have one here. I know that a lot of local churches now have them. Let me just throw this up on screen. And I'll just put myself up on screen as well. So you've got yourself an ATEM Mini Pro. Or you've got yourself an ATEM Mini. Or you've got yourself an ATEM ISO. The ATEM Mini is a great little thing, but it doesn't have the streaming capabilities and other bits and pieces. The ATEM Mini Pro has the ability to stream live and record, and the ATEM Mini Pro ISO records everything that you're doing, so you can go back afterwards into DaVinci Resolve and you can re-edit it afterwards. So you get all of these wonderful controls. You get to record, you get to stream. So I recommend that people use the ATEM Mini Pro. It's the mid one in there. It's around, well, depending on where you get it from, it's around £550. And it's fantastic. You get to plug in 4 inputs into it, a couple of audio sources. So I'm just doing a current picture-in-picture and presentation at the same time. Now, at the moment, for ease, I'm actually using Ecamm Live. I've got the controller behind me, I've got my other controller next to me, and I've got a Stream Deck so I can control the scenes. So we can very easily and seamlessly move between the presentation, the camera, add and remove any comments that we want to and other bits and pieces. The ATEM Mini Pro doesn't allow you to add the comments, it just allows you to add the feeds. So we thought we'd have a play with that. So let's start with how we would say use Ecamm Live and the features that that has, because in theory you don't actually need the ATEM Mini Pro if you have something like Ecamm. It's software based, and one of the great features is it allows you to stack up all of your scenes, but it also has a little feature on there called virtual camera. So you can send the signal of your Ecamm software directly to something like Zoom. So if you're still doing Zoom Church, you can use the flexibility of loading in your videos, any audio, bits of worship and stuff like that into Ecamm, so you then don't have to do your share screen kind of thing. However, some of you have said that you're still using the OBS Project, the open source broadcasting software. Now this is fantastic. It uses a little NDi plugin. I'll put a link to that below, so that you can actually connect it to Skype and you can bring all of your additional guests in through Skype and connect them directly into OBS. So here you can see on screen, we did a little game show. We kind of did that Taskmaster kind of thing, and we put on our contestants in, Taskmaster in the middle, and we were able to do a live scoreboard. Very, very flexible, and it just means you need to get a little bit creative in how you do things. You have the ability to control all the individual audio, and like something like Photoshop or Keynote or PowerPoint, you get to stack up everything in a row. So I've got the names, I've got little containers around the people. The containers I just downloaded. They were it was a gaming pack for Twitch, which also works with OBS really easily. So for ease, just throwing everybody in and stuff like that. It's not hugely complicated, but it is a whole lot of fun to do. As you can see, I'm stretching around there, taking a picture. We've got the different members. The only problem with it was when somebody dropped out of Signal, they lost it. You got the little Skype symbol where their name was supposed to be, but as soon as they reconnected, it dropped them straight back in again. Now, one of the fun things with anything that we do is we try and figure out how to go out on multiple platforms at the same time. Whether we're using ReStream or Castr, now each one of those has a cost attached to it. Personally, I've had a play with ReStream. I didn't get on terribly well with it. What I did get on well with was, well, the reason I didn't like it so much is because at the lower end of the tiers you had to have their watermarks and everything, and it was quite expensive if you wanted to be able to ReStream. The one that I'm really in favour of is Castr, which allows me to connect one source to it, and I can push out onto YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Mixer, whatever I want, and I can send the one signal out to multiple platforms. What is tricky though is adding comments. Typically, if you want to throw comments up on screen, you can only generally use one platform. There are some other solutions out there, but they do get very expensive. So here's the thing. It's all very well and good having the ATEM. It's good having something like OBS. But what we actually need to do is we need to bring sources in. We need capture cards, and capture cards can be very expensive. Things like the Elgato HD60S, very expensive. Anything upwards of £150. However, I did find this fantastic little HDMI capture device. Excuse me while I just have a little sip of my tea. That when I picked it up on Amazon, again a link will be below, it was £6.23 and did exactly the same. It brought in full HD at 30 frames a second, absolutely perfect. So what I was able to do was connect that into my computer using OBS. So you can either use the ATEM to bring your sources in, or you can just get lots of the little HDMI adapters and bring those in. However, when you're on a bit of a budget and you're trying to do a bit of live streaming and you're trying to figure out how to bring multiple cameras, you're still using Zoom and other bits and pieces, here is a bit of a recommendation. So what I'm typically wanting to do is I'm wanting to bring in a camera like this, a live video feed, a presentation, so I'm also needing to bring in my laptop at the same time. So I've got a little MacBook that I've connected a Keynote onto, which is also up on screen. And then typically you have another computer running Zoom. You then are plugging these all into, so I've got camera 1 plugged into the ATEM, I've got Zoom from another laptop plugged into the ATEM, and I've got my presentation plugged into the ATEM, so that I can easily switch. As you can see, the top corner there, top center, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so I can switch between my inputs and I can put things on screen. I can then use something like Castr to restream it onto YouTube and to Facebook. Works wonderfully. However, here's the thing. When you're using Zoom and you're connecting it to something like the ATEM, or even through the USB dongle to OBS Studio, What you have to do is make sure that Zoom is in dual monitor mode, so that you can still push that signal to the ATEM and broadcast it out. What's really, really useful, as you can see from the picture, is the presenter experience is as important as the user experience going through it. So what you want to make sure is that your presenters still have a good view of what's going on. Because when you broadcast out and you bring in additional media, you might have some pre-recorded worship, as in the picture here. Anybody on Zoom can't actually see that. They can't actually see or hear what's going on. So what I did is I did a cheeky way of splitting the output from the ATEM Mini, and so I could send the multi-view back into Zoom. So I was actually on the Zoom call twice. Quite cheeky, quite interesting. So as you can see on screen, everybody on the call who's participating either in your show or your service or something like that can all see what's going on. They can see what's live, what's queued to go next, and they can see the presentation. So it's really helpful to be able to do that in that kind of way. Here's a cheeky little picture of me. I've got the laptop with the Zoom call. On the left, I've got the keynote. And then up above you can see that I've got the pre-roll going and the different things queued up. You end up, as you can see, with lots and lots of wires everywhere. But it means that you're reducing the stress levels of what you're doing. I suppose the recommendation then, if you're going for like the real small entry-level way, is you still have your camera and you have your, I'll do it this way, your laptop for Zoom and your laptop for the presentation. You then have 3 USB HDMI capture cards, so you're taking a HDMI cable from both of them, and then you're using OBS to collect those and switch between the scenes. You then broadcast that to YouTube, and then you take the share link that you get from YouTube and you share that on Facebook. So you're removing the need to ReStream because you're just taking the link from YouTube and posting it onto Facebook. You're removing the need for the ATEM Mini Pro because you're using 3 HDMI capture through USB and something like OBS Studio to hold it all together. OBS is free. The 3 capture devices, so you're looking at £30 for 3 capture devices, and your YouTube account is free. Camera, as long as it's got a clean HDMI output, so you can plug from the HDMI, and when you put it on the screen, none of the additional information is there about the frame rate, the ISO and other bits and pieces. And then that will show you clean, and that's me. And then Zoom to bring everybody else in. There's a little bit of a strange one in between Zoom and the internet and your laptop and things like that. One more sip of tea. The thing is, when you're on a Zoom call, or when you're sending the audio from your laptop in a...
I just saw that.
Okay, I think we've just lost a little bit of signal. So then I can bring the audio in from myself and bring it in. So just to recap, because we don't know when we actually lost the stream, is when you're using the ATEM or OBS and you're using Zoom, it's really important to know that your own audio doesn't go through. Okay, it's a meeting software, not a presentation software. So whenever you speak, none of the people watching, your viewers, will be able to hear you. They'll only be able to hear the audio from the people on the Zoom call. So if you need the audio to come from the Zoom call, then you need to make sure that you use the capture device from one of your other, the camera with the microphone on top of it, to capture your own audio, but also make sure that you're monitoring through a pair of headphones so you don't get an audio feedback loop. So the ATEM is really good. You do end up, I mean, it shows you this wonderful neat picture. You do end up with an awful lot of wires. I don't know anybody who has all identical wires and they all look nice and neat like that. From my experience, all of the people using the ATEM, there's just wires everywhere, which is quite fun. Alrighty, so that's the ATEM. or the HDMI capture devices. Something really easy to think about. So if you have any comments or questions, do ask them below. The only other question that I was asked, which was about WhatsApp, and again, was about the resolution and frame rates that you use for WhatsApp videos. Both with OBS, ATEM, and even if you're pushing stuff out on mobile phones, I'd say really be careful about the orientation, whether you do portrait or indeed landscape. Because one of the things that you need to make sure is that if your audience are watching portrait style, then always create your videos in portrait mode. If you're creating them to share on WhatsApp, using something like CineMaster to create a portrait project, editing it, but then exporting it in the lowest resolution possible, so all the way down to 720, and then posting it, making sure that the file size is really, really small, because obviously whatever size that video is, so if it's a 12 megabyte file, then that on the other end is going to need 12 megabytes of data in theory to download it to be able to play it. So if you're sharing and doing anything on WhatsApp, film it in the orientation that people are going to hold the phone, but also make sure you export it in a low enough resolution that it's not going to use too much data, especially if people are specifically in areas where data is quite expensive. So that's pretty much it. That is 20 minutes of a quick brain blast. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to do another one of these next week on Thursday at the same time. So if you have any questions or comments, drop them into the video below and we will do our best to answer them next week. But until then, bye for now.